Inspiring, educating, and at times entertaining. This is the Retirement Years Podcast with your hosts, Mary Ellen French and Dave Wing.
Hi there, I'm Mary Ellen.
And I'm Dave, and welcome to Season 3 of the Retirement Years Podcast. And hello to you, Mary Ellen. It's good to be back together with an entire season lying before us that promises to be a good one, of course, right? Of course,
Yes.
It's going to be a good one. And it's been a busy fall, I know, and that's going to lead us now into this month of December, which will be even more hectic for a lot of people, you know, that plan for the holidays and the many different ways that so many people celebrate during this month, and that's going to occur. So everybody's busy, but we hope they take some time out to give us a listen.
Yeah, I need to take full responsibility here for the fact that we've had a very long break since the end of season 2. That wasn't our plan, but as with many things in life, best laid plans sometimes go awry.
Yes.
I chose to return to work full time on what was supposed to have been a short contract for 4 weeks, and that turned into a 5-month commitment. So unfortunately, the podcast creation kind of went on hold. So huge thanks to you, Dave, and to our social media manager, Madison, because between the two of you, you really kept our podcast baby alive out in the world on the various social media platforms. So I'm really grateful to you guys for doing that.
Well, and there are not many people who would leave me in charge of their day. So you're welcome. It feels good to be needed. So while Mary Ellen was looking to achieve a work-life balance while in retirement, I told her that clearly her life abhors a vacuum. She has the luck where if there's space in her plans, boom, something will come along and fill it, whether she initiated it or, and more often than not, someone else did. But to be fair, the job you left and are returning to on occasion as a school principal was not just a job to you. And I know it's a big part of your life. You work hard to ensure, I know this firsthand, to ensure the best learning environment for students and for staff. And being lured back into that position, even temporarily, I know is something that I totally understand and I respect. So no apologies necessary. And here we are.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I mean, a lot of people ask me why I would, quote unquote, give up retirement to return to work full time. And honestly, it's a great question, right? We're going to explore, my answer as well as other people's answers to that later on in the season, because we're going to be talking with several guests who, like me, retired and then chose to return to the world of work in some capacity. Some people returned to a job that was in the same sector, like I did, that they retired from. And then we're going to talk to some other guests who chose to pursue completely different opportunity for employment in new fields. So we've asked all of them why, and I think our listeners are going to be surprised by some of their answers.
Well, and I can tell you this, Mary Ellen, from someone who's worked in a fairly highly regulated field, going back to work in something else where that isn't the feeling and you could always quit because you're retired, that does hold some appeal. And I'm sure it does for some of the folks listening today. And in regards to today's podcast, we're beginning a new season of the Retirement Years Podcast. And we thought, well, you did, and I'm convinced that it would be interesting to start off with a look at the history of the whole concept of retirement, something that I thought was around forever, because in my lifetime, my parents' lifetime, as I saw it, they worked for a certain time, moved into retirement. But in some ways, it's a relatively new concept. And as Joel said at the intro today, we're joining you to inform, inspire, and once in a while, entertain. So hopefully today falls into at least one, or if not more, of those categories.
Well, and I have to thank a friend of mine, Carol, who when I was having a conversation with her earlier in the spring, and she was asking me what I was up to in retirement, and I was telling her about the podcast, and she said, "Oh, retirement." She said, "That's very interesting. It's a relatively new construct, And that hadn't really occurred to me. And so, that's, I took a bit of a deep dive into the history of retirement and thought, wow, if this was interesting and new for me, maybe it'll be interesting and new for some of our listeners as well. So here you go.
Yeah, and like you're saying, as part of that sort of deep dive and getting familiar with the history of the whole construct, throughout most of history, up to the 1900s, which, depending on how old you are, that's more recent than for other people. But it's still, we didn't live long enough to stop working.
Right.
On average. We all hope to live a long life today, but the global life expectancy, 1900, was 31 years.
Yeah.
So there wasn't this driving need to have a retirement or retirement plan or some sort of retirement set up for society.
No.
But by 2017, which again isn't that much longer, the average global life expectancy jumps to 72.2 years.
Yeah.
And that's on average. And that's that's a nearly double increase. And largely due to developments in modern medicine, sanitation, of course, working conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have longer lifespans. We have, in some ways, some expanding prosperity, population shifts tied to the Industrial Revolution, people moving into more urban centers.
Mm-hmm.
And the modern concept of retirement became necessary.
Yeah. I was interested to note that retire as a verb actually comes from the French word, which I'm going to probably mispronounce, but retirer, which means to withdraw. And so, it's interesting because it's like the implication is that you're withdrawing from a working life. And I don't know that necessarily fits with how we see retirement now.
I would
that's
agree.
The root of it.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it if you believe that it does fit, that's part of the fear of pulling out from that work environment, because you become irrelevant perhaps in your mind. And it obviously doesn't have to be that way. We've talked to lots of people over the first 2 seasons and now heading into the third, of people that took full advantage of the time they have now. But looking back, once in a while, Mary Ellen, a political problem can lead to a concept that actually benefits people. It can. 1889. So we're going back a number of years. German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck decided that he needed to do something proactive to prevent a potential uprising by young, unemployed Marxists. So there would be a lot of unrest at the time.
Yeah.
So he offered working citizens aged 70 and older a pension. And the pension would be paid for by the state from taxes collected from workers and businesses, very similar to today's model, actually, for a country like Canada, where we have the CPP. And those 70 and older would get the benefit if they left the workforce voluntarily. And that established the idea of at least what a set retirement age would be, at that time 70, and government payments to older adults who elected to exit the workforce at a certain age. To make room, I guess, essentially.
Yeah. I found it interesting too, Dave, that even earlier than that, like one of the earliest records of retirement was in 13 BC, when Roman Emperor Augustus instituted a pension program for a select group of Roman legionnaires who had served 20 years in the military. And really, that was mostly to ensure that those retired soldiers wouldn't rise up against the Roman Empire. True. So again, politically inspired. So at the same time that Bismarck was doing what he was doing in North America, it was the private sector, specifically, I think it was a railroad company, who first introduced retirement benefits and established an employee contribution plan to those retirement benefits. And corporately, it was the American Express Company that established the first corporate pension plan. So I thought that was interesting. And then, of course, over the years, pensions grew in popularity it was a way for companies, especially, to reward tenured, loyal employees, but it also opened up space to recruit a younger workforce, which you mentioned.
In 1935, Franklin Roosevelt successfully instituted the Social Security Act in the United States. And that act established retirement benefits at the federal level for 65-year-olds. And then a number of years later, 1965, Medicare health benefits for the elderly were also added. And after World War II, the North American economy rebounded dramatically, and pension plans grew. They grew in size and popularity. And as you mentioned, a vital employee recruitment and retention tool. You stay here, you'll get a nice pension at the end. Now, today, pensions aren't offered by employers as commonly in the private sector, at least. And some of those non-unionized factories may offer a signing bonus or retention bonuses to new workers. So just a different way to attract people to come and work there and hopefully stay. And so with now we have an established retirement age in North America, and we've got some people in retirement with some income. And the market said, there's an opening, let's respond. And radio and later television, film, and golf course development, surprise, grew in popularity to provide people with convenient, enjoyable ways to pass the time. And the development of the concept of leisure time was born. And that is a birth I'll always remember. I do love me some leisure time. That's for sure.
Well, I mean, when you think about it, like you were saying earlier, right? In the 1900s by 1900, the average life expectancy was 31. Like, who needed a golf course?
Yeah.
And so when we started being able to live longer lives, and there was something after a working life, it only makes sense that leisure time was born and the void must be filled, kind of like my calendar. So in Canada, by 1950, the average life expectancy was 67. So that meant, as I was saying, that a lot of older adults were living well past their retirement date. So in 1952, Canada introduced the old age security for people 70 years and older. And then in 1966, the Canada Pension Plan and the Quebec Pension Plan came into effect. And at that point, they reduced the qualifying age for the old age security to 65 years. So that's the status in Canada.
And then, Mary Ellen, we go ahead to the 1980s, decade that I remember fondly, most of it. Many countries lowered the age at which people could retire and collect full-time benefits. Now, mainly it was a part of an effort to clear older workers out of the workforce to make way for younger workers. However, some countries have subsequently reversed those policies from the 80s, and they've had to increase retirement ages to prevent aging populations from breaking the bank, as it were, like blowing their budgets, or so they say. For example, in the US, Denmark, Spain, Greece, retirement age is now 67 years. And Ireland comes in at 66. And as you'll remember, just this calendar year, France raised the retirement age by 2 years, from 62 to 64. And that led to a lot of uprising and a lot of widespread strikes, but they did go ahead with that. But that the trend going up now, because, well, I think it may be twofold. I think those workers that were deemed that it was their time, I think as a whole, we realize there's a lot more for those individuals to give. And it is expensive to have a pension with the population ballooning more toward our age. Yeah.
Well, and so I'm intrigued by this next stat that as of 2020, Saudi Arabia has the lowest retirement age at 47.
Wow.
So at 47, you can begin to collect full retirement benefits if you're in Saudi Arabia. And Turkey, the age is 52.
Yeah, that is incredible.
So yeah, if we have any listeners in either of those countries, we'd love to hear some feedback from you.
Yeah. And as we said, globally, we're living longer, and raising that retirement age seems intuitive to say, well, if the life expectancy span is moving to the right, then let's make the retirement age older too. But I certainly understand someone caught in that has been working their entire life at a goal, and they had a date eventually, how frustrating it would be to have the line moved on you.
Oh, definitely.
Anywhere during that, but especially during the last, say, 5 years when it starts becoming real. So that's, it's understandable that for some, that would be extremely frustrating.
For sure. And I mean, with life expectancy and time in retirement continuing to lengthen, much longer than even 50 years ago with the continued advancements in medicine and tech, that's really brought about a significant shift in how we view retirement conceptually, right? It's now become a long stage of life, and one that can be well lived as opposed to an event.
Well, because we have seen our own parents and obviously their parents before that. So we're not talking, like, we're looking back a generation, two at the most, where the idea of for many North Americans, the retirement was move or winter in Florida. and, be a snowbird and
Yeah.
envisioning their days of riding around in a golf cart or playing bridge or golf or doing
Yes.
whatever they wanted to do in a relatively affordable and warm climate. But clearly we are seeing that trend change.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So the trend now in North America anyway, is that people are retiring later, actually. The median retirement age in Canada was 61 in 2000, and by 2020, it had gone up to 65. So I would imagine that's due in part to a growing restlessness among older adults for whom pursuing leisure, as great as it sounds, it just doesn't work long term because it lacks purpose. And we've talked about that. Season 2, we interviewed Dr. Riley Moynes, and he talked about that, right? Like that's that honeymoon phase.
Yeah.
And it's fine until it isn't, right? So also we're more likely to be healthy at age 65 now than we would have been 100 years ago. And most of us anyway can expect to live another 20 years. And we want and need to continue to be productive. We want to contribute to our communities. And for some, it comes from a place of fear that, they're still working because they won't be able to afford to retire because they can expect to live a long time in retirement, and they're worried about running out of money.
I'd be the first to say that those who worked hard and now they're retired, they deserve all the leisure time they want to take. Like, I want to be clear on that. I'm not anti-leisure, as I mentioned previously, but I get it. 20 to 30 years of relaxing, 20 to 30 years of only one anything would become a little mundane.
Yeah.
And I think humans, we're built to be productive. We enjoy that. Like, who hasn't got to the end of a busy day and go and look back and go, wow. And why does it give me a kick if I have a list and I cross something off and I go, wow, look what I did. And I'll even cheat and write down something I did, but wasn't on there, and then cross that off, which is totally unnecessary, but it feels good doing it.
It does.
Because you like to be productive.
Yeah.
And I think that is leading to a shift in what retirement looks like.
Yeah.
And as we've said how many times? Every time, that looks different for everyone.
It does, because another current trend that we're seeing is a switch to a dream job in your 50s or even your 60s. And for a lot of people, that's more about finding something or pursuing something that aligns with your passions or your values. It's probably a lot less pay, but it may be a lot more rewarding. And so it makes a really nice bridge to pursue that dream job, a nice bridge into eventual full retirement.
Yeah. And that's kind of our review of how did this retirement concept begin? And we can only imagine what it's going to be like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, because the workforce trends have changed so much too. As far as there being fewer index pensions, certainly, or those sorts of things that people would work toward and rely on and then have that income. So who knows what retirements of the future will look like. And, we might be on about season 62 by the time we get to that. So there's no question, though, whatever type of retirement you want, planning will help with that. And we've talked about that in previous episodes as well. And if you are already retired, there's always plenty of ways to reinvent yourself and to formulate new plans to live the way you want to. So in this season, I'm doing a little, I'm moving on to this. Isn't that a great segue? I thought it was
a really good segue.
Why don't I just get to it? In this season, we will speak with two guests who have devoted a lot of their work time or personal time or both to help others plan and organize retirement. We will speak with Joe Curry, a financial planner who specializes in retirement planning and the management of assets in retirement. And Joe will convince you that it isn't scary to talk to a financial planner. In fact, you'll come away feeling a lot better. And we also spoke with Fritz Gilbert, and Mary Ellen, you and I've discussed, Fritz was a wonderful person to like in speaking with him and the time he gave to us, considering his life seems incredibly busy.
Yes.
He has a ton of information that he shares online in his blog entitled The Retirement Manifesto. And both of these guests, I feel, will inspire you to find ways to enjoy your retirement journey. So we're looking forward to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think that it's going to be a lot easier for those of you who aren't retired yet. It's a lot less scary to let go of the familiar if you've already planned out and are excited for what you're moving towards, as opposed to, maybe having a mindset of, oh, I can't wait to be done working full time, and not having a vision for what's on the other side. Like I really can't emphasize enough what a difference I think it makes for people if they do put some time and into planning for what they're moving toward.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So some of the other guests that we're going to hear from this season, a lot of the topics for this season came actually from listeners. So shout out to listeners who took the time to reach out to us, either on our Instagram or Facebook pages, or, emailed us by going to our website, theretirementyearspodcast.com, and sending us an email, theretirementyearspodcast@gmail.com. We were blown away by the amount of feedback that we got. And even if it was just people reaching out to say, oh, we really love you guys, and some people wrote in with some really good constructive criticism. And for those of you who did that, we hope that you have tuned in to season 3 and that you're going to hear the impact of some of the feedback that you gave us. We're going to talk with several guests this season, as I mentioned earlier, who are really redefining retirement for themselves, right? They've done the planning that we talk about, and in some cases have decided that they do want to go back to work, and it's for a variety of reasons. And so I think you're going to find that those are some really interesting guests. We're also going to talk to some very well-educated people in the area of emergency preparedness. And so we're going to talk with them about what older adults can do to be prepared when a natural disaster strikes. And certainly here in Canada, this past summer, we saw an unprecedented amount of wildfires. And I know that impacted most of North America, well down into the southern United States this summer. So I think that's a really timely one. And we're also going to talk to an expert on why older adults make excellent volunteers in times of crisis. So we're really excited that, as I said, several of this season's episodes have come from suggestions from listeners. So please keep your questions and your ideas coming. We love hearing from our listeners. Oh, and speaking of our socials, congratulations to one lucky listener, Michelle, who won our Retirement Years podcast t-shirt giveaway at the end of season 2. So be sure that you follow us on Instagram and Facebook, because we do have some more giveaways coming up this season, hint, hint. And you can also follow us on the platform formerly known as Twitter, which I believe is now called X. That's X. Dave's area of expertise, not mine. Because that's where you're going to find out about, drum roll please, our merch launch. So that's coming soon. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that as the time draws closer.
Mary Ellen, one other set of guests that I'll mention too coming up is we're going to be speaking with a couple of individuals who are death doulas or end of life doula. Yeah. And when we hear the term doula, we usually consider that with birth. And I think their story will explain how essential it can be to have someone to help you or a loved one in their final journey, and it's actually quite inspiring. So that'll be something to look forward to this season as well.
Listen, thank you to our listeners. Thank you for continuing to support us by sharing our podcast with everyone you know, and for following us on Facebook and Instagram and X. We do this for you, Dave and I. It's a labor of love, and it is so gratifying for us to know and hear from you that we are making a difference. So we really thank you for that.
And I would echo that. But coming up next time, we have our first guests of season 3, and they were an absolute delight to meet. We'll be speaking with authors David and Susan Schwartz about their fun and informative book entitled The Joy of Costco, A Treasure Hunt from A to Z. And you won't want to miss that. I hope you can join us next episode. So until next week, I'm Dave.
And I'm Mary Ellen. Stay well.
You have been listening to the Retirement Years Podcast. Web design by Gavin Hinton. Social media marketing and management provided by Madison Sloan at MSS Mad Media. Original music by Theodora Draper.